Now that you know how I came to be the tropical fruit nut that I am, let's go on a tour of my garden. So this is my tropical garden. It is situated right next to two large south-facing doors. Well, at least the main garden is. I have a couple other locations, but we'll get to them later. As you can see, I have many plants, and to preserve the wood of the floor and not have something that happened a few years ago when, well, the floor started to degrade a little. To prevent that, I have these big, I believe they're from Home Depot, these big black cement mixers, and I put my pots directly in them. It catches all the water that runs off. It's easier to water. I don't have to worry about anything, and they work great. This year, actually, everything looks quite a bit nicer than the year before. And we start the tour. First up is a cherimoya. Now this has not really lost too many leaves after coming back inside, and it looks quite nice. This is one of the cherimoyas I grew from seed. It is putting out new growth, as you can see. It is in a nice big pot, and well, it branched out quite nicely, though I certainly don't expect to get fruit anytime soon, or even flowers. It looks quite nice. I mean, it's alive. Behind it is a mame sapoti, which I have one of because I only bought one fruit and there was one seed in that fruit, which was by weight, so I got the smallest one. So that one huge seed that I actually thought wouldn't sprout, well, it sprouted. And I've got a mame sapoti, and it looks quite nice. It is one of the few plants that, at least so far, it hasn't really had too many shocks from going back inside. I mean, it loses a couple leaves at the bottom and doesn't really grow too fast, but it grows quite nicely. Behind it is another cherimoya. This one, as you can see, has lost quite a lot of leaves, and well, that's usually the case, what happens, and the tips have died. But that's usually what happens, and they tend to either die quickly or put out new shoots. Now next to it is my giant dragon fruit. This really is a monster, not because it's tall or big or anything, but because of those roots. Those aerial roots really make it look monstrous, and I love it. I mean, it's wonderful. It's a red flesh. Yeah, I believe it's a red-fleshed dragon fruit, and it's growing in a nice big pot. I may need to transplant it soon. It's putting out some new growth since coming back inside. Of course, when it comes back inside, it doesn't really grow thick leaves because there's no sun, but it grows nicely. Next to that is another monster, a passion fruit. One of the few passion fruits that I took in. Now, the reason why my garden doesn't really look very messy this year, even though it does, but not as messy as last year, is because, well, I unfortunately left some passion fruit out to die. But it's putting out this beautiful growth, and it has this huge leaf. One of the leaves is really huge. That leaf grew during the summer. Now, I don't think I'm gonna get those sizes of leaves. All this is, by the way, one plant. Some other pots of passion fruit had multiple passion fruit in one pot, but this is one plant. And, well, it's starting to grow really nicely. I would love to get some flowers this year. Yeah, right. Here is my orange, my caracara navel orange that I grew from a seed in a seedless caracara navel orange. Now I have two of these, I'll show the second one later. This is the nicer looking of the two. In this shot, it's putting out a lot of new growth. Right now that new growth has become old growth. And it looks really nice. Of course, everything's nice. The leaves are beautiful, especially the ones that grew during the summer. They're large and it smells wonderful. It's in a big nursery pot. Of the two caracara navel oranges this is the one that likes to branch. And it is looking quite nice and healthy, and I just love it. Of course, the leaves turn towards the sun, so it's kind of hard to see that it's a nice looking plant, but once it comes outside, well, my dad will finally see what's my nicest plant. For some reason he thinks my dragon fruit is the nicest looking plant. I disagree. Here we have potatoes, fingerling potatoes. Now in this shot they are just barely coming out of the soil. Now this shot is from about a month ago and things have changed, let me put it that way. Things have gone as usual a little different than I planned, but I have potatoes growing indoors. Now here we have a cacao. Now I have a selection of cacao that I put in these plastic bags because they were dying on me and I can't stand it when, especially these. This is a criollo from Montoso Gardens. Well, I put them in plastic bags because the reason they were dying is simple: humidity shock. They were humid outside and now they're not. There you can see some more of the potatoes. Now here we have another one of the criollos in these plastic bags. Now the plastic bags are sort of made to billow out by some skewers. Hopefully you can see in there that while the tip has died, it's trying to put out a bunch of new shoots and it has some nice leaves. Well, that leaf isn't nice, but here's the third one. This one is putting out new leaves and I really love new cacao leaves. This is one of my 3 precious criollos. There behind the mame sapote in the next cement mixer bin is a Colorado Trinitario cacao. Now the new growth, I don't know if you can see, but the new growth is this brilliant red coppery color and it's really wonderful. I think new growth on cacao is perhaps the most beautiful new growth, maybe except for something like cinnamon, but I love the leaves of cacao more, so I prefer cacao. Here's another Grand Trinitario / Colorado. This one is a bit nutrient deficient in some of the leaves, but the nutrient deficiency tends to solve itself. Let me put it that way, when most of the leaves fall off and there are enough nutrients in the soil for the 2 remaining leaves. Here is a jackfruit, one of my 2 surviving jackfruits, and honestly I don't know if this one's gonna live. All the leaves fell off. It looked really nice during the summer. I moved it in and it could be humidity, it could be something else. It has that tip that hasn't grown a bit and all the leaves fell off. But this is a jackfruit from a seed from a store-bought jackfruit, so maybe it's not doing too well because it's from a store. Some other things I have that came from a grocery store aren't doing too well, where close relatives of that species that came from a grocery store but came from maybe not a grocery store but either fresher fruits or fruits closer to the source. You'll see what I mean later. Those sort of do better. My garden is a bit messy. There's leaves everywhere. Here are a couple more of the Trinitario, the Colorado Trinitario. I think they're all Colorado. I'm not exactly sure. The ones in the yogurt containers, the sort of bigger pots, those are all Colorado. Here's my other caracara navel orange. This one has perhaps the most beautiful stem I've ever seen on any citrus. It has these huge leaves and they're glossy, and this video doesn't do it justice, especially with the awful lighting, but hopefully you can see with my big hand in the frame. These leaves really are big and they are beautiful. Too bad it only has that one stem. This cacao navel orange tends to do this. Tends to have one stem that grows very beautiful. See this stem right here? This was a beautiful stem like that other one. All the leaves fell off and it only has a few side branches and a tuft of leaves at the top left. But that's what happens with this one. It grows a beautiful, beautiful stem and then doesn't grow. Beautiful stem stops growing. While my other cacao navel grows really nicely. There are a couple more stems that sort of flopped over. This also tends to have stems that flop over. Here's my third and last cherimoya, and as you can see, it has a new growing tip, and all the leaves fell off, basically. Now, this is sometimes what happens with my cherimoyas, quite often actually. All the leaves will fall off during the winter, the moment I take it inside, and sometimes during the summer too. Sometimes I lose cherimoyas. I had like, I don't know, 5 or 6 at the start. Now I have 3. So 50% in 3 years or 2 years. That's pretty good considering that at least one of them died because of me not watering it and it drying out. Behind that we have a coffee plant that I got from Home Depot. For $4 I got a coffee plant. I don't know if it's Arabica. It's coffee and I actually have 4 plants left. It came in this small little awful container with about 10 or more even coffee plants, and one by one, of course, because they're so crowded, they die and they die and they die, and I have 4 left, and something's happening to the leaves. They're falling off. They started growing nicely and then fell off. The 2 leaves at the top for now haven't. There we have a couple more of my cacaos. Here we have a passion fruit. Well, 2 passion fruits in that pot. And we move on for some reason. Here we have 2 passion fruits that I transplanted recently into this bigger pot that come from Puerto Rico, from a yellow-skinned passion fruit. I already have the purple variety, but now I have the yellow. And the seeds really did sprout. The seeds really did sprout nicely with this one. Here we have a poor-looking jade plant. This comes from my grandmother, and I love it. It has a really nice thick stem. It has survived some pretty tough times in a pot way too small for it, and now it's kind of starting to recover. Here we come back and we see another big Trinitario. I believe this is probably the Colorado Trinitario. This is from the original pods I got from Montoso Gardens, the first time I got pods from Montoso Gardens. And it's growing okay, it survived the shock really nicely, but as with a couple others that survived the shock, it hasn't had any new growth. Next to it is another cacao. This one died and came back. When I say die, I mean all the leaf fell off and it stayed a twig for a couple months, but it put out some new shoots. And these leaves that are dying at the top, those are new leaves that were forming when it had to come back in. That usually happens, the new leaves fall off, but the old leaves don't seem to be having too much trouble. They're looking pretty nicely. Of course, it's not putting out any new growth either. We go into this little nook in between my family's TV area, sort of where all the wires are, and we have my plants there. And there we have, that is either an ugly fruit or a lemon. It could be a Mayer lemon, it could be a regular lemon, it could be a cacao navel orange, it could be an ugly fruit. I have no idea. Behind that we have some fajoya, some pineapple guava, which sort of grows and then dies, grows and then dies. I have basically 3 of them left. See, there's a stem that grew and died and, well, isn't coming back. And there you see the amaryllis that always grows and has beautiful large leaves, and then they flop over and die, and it hasn't flowered since the first time I bought it when it was in spike. There we have another jackfruit. Now this one lost a couple leaves, but these leaves, dare I say, are holding on quite nicely, only sort of dying slightly from the tip. They're not too shabby. It hasn't grown any, but I am hoping it will survive. Here we have lychees. Now this lychee is basically dead. I have basically no hope for it. The leaves have died. They grow. What happens is they grow 2 new leaves, and those leaves start from the tip dying, and then my poor lychees have never grown well, and they basically only put out 2 leaves at a time, and when the leaves die faster than a new tip can form, the poor lychees die, and I really have not had much success with them. Here we have an ugly fruit from this beautiful citrus. I really love that citrus. It had many seeds though. It tasted like a sweet grapefruit. And it's really a nice plant. I mean, they haven't really grown big like the caracara navel oranges have, but we'll see what happens out of that. On the windowsill here we have what I was talking about earlier, about some species growing nicely, some not. Now these are, what would you call them? They have many different names. You could say canepa, mamoncillo, Spanish lime. Google one of those, maybe you'll find it. It's a relative of the lychee, and it has leaves that are quite similar to the lychee, not exactly, but these, unlike the lychee, are growing very nicely, and I have no complaints with them. The tips of the leaves are dying slowly, but they're certainly not like the lychees, and they're putting out new growth right now, so that's very good. And here on the top of this speaker we have another ugly fruit. This one actually is my nicest ugly fruit and really makes a nice piece. I mean, nice plant. If that was my only plant, it would be a nice plant to have. And here you can see how my whole tropical fruit garden, at least in this area, sort of fits together. Here we have another cacao. This one is the tallest cacao I have. As you can see, a lot of the leaves are sort of browning at the edges. It has not put out new growth, though it hasn't really died a lot. It has taken the shock quite nicely. And it is my tallest cacao. And here we have another of the passion fruit, and here we have some strawberries that will hopefully grow. And these plastic bag cacao, the one on the right is a small medium red Trinitario, and the one on the left is, you can't see it in this shot, but it is a very cool sort of corkscrew shaped, the stem is corkscrew shaped Colorado from the newer order of pods. Here we have another Colorado from the older order of pods from Montoso Gardens. This is my cacao with the thickest stem. You can't see it on the video well, but it is quite thick on the bottom. And this one has an interesting story. This one tends to grow up, and at the very end of the summer it splits, and then it dies back during the winter. And then again it grows, splits, and then all the tips die, and then it grows back from the main stem. I wonder if that'll happen for the 3rd year in a row. We'll see. Here we have another main area of mine next to this nice south-facing window set. It really is a great place for growing these plants. Here on the left we have a tree tomato. This tree tomato came from the smallest little seed you could imagine, and it has become my biggest plant by far. The main stem is just huge, and it really is tall. It has it has become too big for my garden indoors, and the leaves are huge, and it has hit the ceiling. Yeah. I don't know what's gonna happen to it. I'm gonna let it grow. Now when I take it outside, I'm gonna snip the tip so that it starts branching out, but for now, let's see what happens. Those leaves, the sides of the leaves are always sort of flopped. It's not because I didn't water them enough, but that's what happens. And here we have some more of my plants. Here we have some hot peppers, habaneros. I'm growing in yogurt containers. Here we have an orchid that is in spike. Now this is my mother's orchid, but actually now my orchid, because she gave it to me. She told me if it would flower, she will give it to me. About a week later, it has a spike. No, my mother's orchids really never flower, they don't grow very well, but this year I told her to put them outside, and she did, and well, 2 of them are in spike. You'll see the second one later. Here we have another passion fruit, the yellow passion fruit. Here we have a hydroponic tomato. This is a tomato that came from a cutting of a brandywine tomato and is growing in a cup with some water in it. No nutrients, not real hydroponic growing. What do you think I was, professional? No, just a cup with water, and I'm just trying to see how long will it survive. It tends to lose leaves as fast as it grows new ones, but it hasn't died yet. There, I don't know if you'll be able to see, but there's a little strawberry seedling. These are alpine strawberries from Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds. Here we have another thing from Montoso Gardens from when I visited last year. This is a Spanish tamarind that sort of tastes like a mixture of dried apples and dried apricots, and it's sort of this mush, and it's a really nice fruit. Here we have a rose apple, also from Montoso Gardens, and it's putting out this beautiful new growth. I mean, really beautiful. Here we have a spider plant that came from a small little, I don't know what you call it, baby from my grandmother, and has grown quite big and has many babies now and is sort of taking over. And that big stem now has many flowers, and that's the thickest sort of stem with babies on it I have. Here we have a habanero I am basically turning into a bonsai. This comes from seeds from Giant, and in this shot it's flowering like crazy. This is the nicest one, and it has many little habaneros on it, many little fruit, and is the only thing that's really fruiting in my indoor garden. I am quite happy with this. This one really has a nice shape compared to the others, sort of this branching out, this rounded branching out. There we have a yellow dragon fruit. I'm pretty sure this is a yellow dragon fruit, so Megalanthus. Different species than the red and white dragon fruits, and it's much tastier. And that dragon fruit is growing on the pot of this, my avocado. This avocado comes courtesy of my grandmother. I couldn't germinate avocado seeds, she could. And I've got an avocado. And it's really branching out nicely, and it's even growing new leaves during the winter, which is surprising. It has nice leaves, though they kind of, and it has, if you can understand what I mean, these sort of knobbly looking leaves. I mean, they're not too straightish, but it's a really big plant. It's an old plant, and it's branching out nicely, and I'm really quite proud of it. It has almost died a few times, and it's growing in this huge pot that I can barely move out of the house, but it's branching out nicely, and it really looks nice. Here we have another plant that came from Craigslist for free. I got this wonderful pot. I mean, that pot is absolutely wonderful, and a really nice looking houseplant. Here we have some more houseplants. What's that? Some kind of, I don't know if they're called lilies or anything. Here we have some more passion fruit. Yeah, some more passion fruit. So here in this room, this is the dining room, and I have a couple more plants. Now, these are the plants that were sort of too ugly to make it to my main grow room, and they are in front of a north-facing window. Some more red-fleshed dragon fruits, with this one plant in the same large pot as the other one, and some passion fruit, the purple variety. They're pretty big, don't you think? But here there are mainly several plants in each pot rather than the one plant in the pot previously. These plants are here basically to survive, and they're not dying, even though I'm not really good at watering them. Really, they're staying here just so I don't throw them away, and they seem to be surviving and even growing a little bit. Even though, especially here, I am not very good at watering. So as you can see, I have quite a few plants in quite a small space. Now, if only I had a greenhouse, but no matter. My plan for this tropical fruit garden of mine, as it relates to YouTube and Patreon, is to have an update video on my YouTube channel about once a month and every 2 weeks or so on my Patreon. Also on Patreon, I will show any shipments of plants Also on Patreon, I'll show any shipments of plants or seeds that I get, either in a video or in a short write-up. Now, because I like to show how if the plants grew and give a sort of verdict on whether it's worth getting those seeds or using that company, I kind of wait a couple months to see if the seeds grow before posting anything on YouTube. So you get a bit of an earlier view into what I get. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked it, please consider subscribing. If you really like me for some unknown reason, consider supporting me on Patreon, where I release extended cuts of basically all the videos I put on YouTube, in addition to other special videos and updates and other rewards. Also, for now, that's the only place where I offer plants. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.